Well, hi everyone who's joining us. I'm just going to give it another minute and see if anyone else is joining us, and then we will get started. So give it a few moments. And if you don't mind, Lori, I can see that you're joining us. If you don't mind just dropping in the chat a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you might be looking forward to. And if you're an MRH alumni, what year you were part of. That would be awesome. Awesome. Great. Okay, we're going to get started now. Thanks everyone for coming to join us. We're really excited to have these incredible MRH alumni join us for this conversation on political advocacy. Each one of them has done incredible work in human rights advocacy and really combating the inequities that we see at both a local and global level. A little bit about myself briefly. My name is Ravina and I'll be moderating this discussion today. I am an MRH alumni from 2017, I believe. It's been a long time, but it feels like it was just last year. It was a great opportunity. I forged some incredible relationships and took away a lot of learnings that have been imperative to not just my growth today, but the work that I've continued to do. And now with that said, I am going to pass it on to Laura to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. So I just want to thank everyone for being here today and thank everyone for setting this up and for the facilitators for facilitating these important discussions. So my name is Laura Robinson and I live on unceded Mi'kmaq, Williston, and Passamaquoddy territory along the Bay of Fundy in New Brunswick. And I attended MRH in 2016 while I was completing my Bachelor of Arts in Human Rights in St. Thomas University in Fredericton. And I later went on to do my Master's of Global Governance at the Balsillie School of International Affairs. And I have since worked with Maritime's Guatemala Breaking the Silence Network based in Nova Scotia. And through that work, I have found a really big passion in building international solidarity and international solidarity networks for human rights.
Thanks, Laura, for the intro. Juan?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Juan Arellano. I'm an alumni for the March of Remembrance and Hope 2008 edition. It's been a while. It has really, that experience really transformed or really consolidated how I wanted to approach my career. I'm a graduate from York University in Toronto with a double major in sociology and international development studies. I completed the March when I was in my third year. Before that, I have taken a few, more than a few critical race theory classes and race relations. So going into the trip really consolidated my view of my career. I am now a special projects coordinator with the Ontario government of Consumer Services, where I'm co-leading the anti-racism, inclusion, and accessibility strategy for the ministry. Prior to that, I was in the provinces, in the Ontario province, provincial government anti-racism directorate. So addressing, the systemic inequities that exist within government, but also within all social institutions. And yeah, so this the March has been an amazing experience. I have been lucky enough to form friendships that have lasted, all over the years, and there's extremely close friends. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. And thank you everyone for putting this together.
Thanks, Juan. Goran?
Hi everyone, my name is Goran Miletic, and I am an MRH from 2013. And I currently work as a consultant and an advisor. So I work as a government relations consultant for a small firm based in Edmonton, Alberta. And we do everything from DEI strategies, government relations between private firms to NGOs. And I work as a special, or rather senior advisor for the Global Equality Caucus, and that's based in London. So our focus is gathering as many parliamentarians around the world as possible and unite and bridge some gaps with civil society leaders. And we just recently launched our Asia Lawmakers for Lgbti Equality event. We've done North America and Central America and South America, and we've also done Europe. So we have Africa left, and it's a lot of work, and it's exciting work. And I think MRH back in 2013 has definitely put a big turbo throttle in my interest in human rights, and it's definitely opened up my eyes to a lot of opportunities and possibilities and what my role is in all of it. So I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. And that additional black box over there that says Jason Ho is our incredible individual who has put this all together for us and was also part of my alumnus year. So we're gonna jump right into it. Juan, you gave a great introduction. I know that you've taken multiple courses on critical race theory and race relations, and you joined the Ontario Anti-Racist Directorate as a policy analyst during the height of the global protests against anti-Black racism. And now you oversee the policy and delivery and implementation of the ministry's anti-racism, inclusion, and accessibility strategy. That all said, could you provide some insights into your MRH experience and in what way MRH was foundational for you pursuing the career path that you have so far?
Yeah. So to me, really just if we're looking back at history, what happened during World War II, in historical terms, that happened last week, right? If we go broader, sadly, though, many of those ideologies are still present in many of our communities, I believe too in Canada, right? Especially now that we think that more news are coming out regarding the deaths of children in residential schools, which to me, those residential schools are very closely associated to the Nazi concentration camps, right? The purpose of those was to kill the Indian, and there was no association with anything related to education in those institutions. So coming back from the trip and just learning what we learned, having gone through those 3 death concentration camps or death camps, because really that's the whole purpose of those, visiting the mass graves that we went to, the cemetery in Berlin, the Warsaw Ghetto in Warsaw, Poland, and then just seeing that even though that happened over 60 years ago, but a lot of that mentality still very present. So I was raised to treat everyone the same, right? I do feel that that we are all different, and because of that, we should all be treated the same. So yeah, it's also as a member of of an equity-seeking group, as a Latin American person who have experienced discrimination, systemic and just overt racism. I do want to fight for a more just society, and having being in that trip, and this is like the height of hate, right? It's genocide. So being able to, okay, how can we address this? How can we make our society better? It's been a ride, though, challenging, a lot of ups and downs, a lot of downs, but I think we're making huge strides into equity and inclusion.
Yeah, thanks, Juan, for that. I remember we had an alumnus join us during our trip as well, and she was an Indigenous woman, and during our MRH experience, I know that she had brought light to some of the parallels between what had happened here in Canada, as well as what happened during World War II. So thanks for touching on that. Going to you, Laura, what moment or moments during your MRH experience were life-changing? I know as a scholar yourself in human rights and global governance, how did it shape the career path that you chose?
So I mentioned that I attended MRH in 2016, and I had the good fortune of being accompanied by Ellie Gotts, who I think some of you may have had the chance to, in another past week, see and join in conversation with their really good friend, Daniel. So Ellie is really a fascinating person, and I'll never forget the jokes that he would tell at dinner time. And he probably taught me more about comedic timing than anything else. But I really found the MRH experience to be really powerful and moving. Looking back, it feels and it seems as if it was much longer, even though the experience is really short in time, because it's so powerful and it's so moving. And a lot of those memories, they stay with you a lot, obviously farther than when your whole group disbands at the airport and they get on their connecting flights to go home. And I think that those relationships also stay with you as longer as well. So what I found like impactful and what I continue to dwell on today is more, and what I use in my work currently is more not necessarily like facts or figures that we learned in the moment, even though those can like have deep impacts on you. But it was really the larger lessons that the MRH program can impart and did leave a lasting impact on me. And I think the biggest impact or lesson that the MRH program gave me was about the power of relationships and how that can build allyship and solidarity. And that for me is like the biggest, if not, I guess, like a singular moment, it's kind of like the drawn out experience. And it might not be as apparent in the programming, but I think that's what really benefited me immensely. And that's what I kind of continually draw on after my experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Laura. Goran, yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my MRH experience. I came in with the expectations to learn and garner some perspective of what are the feelings of the current generations of what happened so many years ago, and the genocide and the circumstances that took place after the fact, and what has been currently being taking place. I mean, the fact that MRH exists is a blessing. The fact that it's still going on and it's pushing forward perspectives and ideas, and honestly, it's leadership development, because it's giving us the resources to be able to understand what a leader needs to do and what leadership should be. And I think I take those tools even to this date, including some of the like wise words from Pinchas Gunter of what he's seen over the years, his perspectives on some of the unfortunate situations happening in countries, and what leaders could have done to change the trajectory of some of the choices that they've made. So, and I'm speaking in careful words, because there's definitely different perspectives on this view and on the MRHers. And it's always taking into consideration that if we can at least find neutral ground, whether you're an extremist on one side or another, if you're a complete liberal or a complete conservative, in our case in Canada, we can at least agree that everyone has rights. All humans have rights. And I take that into my work, because I do work with extremists. I work with groups of extremists or churches, for example, that don't necessarily believe that LGBTI either they don't exist or that they shouldn't have the rights. But at the same time, we're all human. So it's finding that neutral ground and making them understand that whether you believe that equal marriage is not believable for two gay men, two gay women, or trans people, you can at least believe that they have the rights to stay alive and be able to experience love in their own way. So, and MRH has definitely given me, like I said, that extra turbo in that belief and my morals and laurels around what human rights means and how we can find that neutral ground for people.
Yeah, no, I love that. And speaking of which, Goran, so I know that you've been a leading advocate, as you mentioned, for the LGBTQ rights around the world. Now, during your career advocacy work, what have been some of your key learnings when it comes to fighting and bridging civil society leaders and government representatives?
Well, one really important piece of information I learned over the years is that civil society leaders and government representatives don't talk, and they never do. And it's not for lack of trying. The issue is with government representatives is that they're so busy, and more often than not, their staff are kind of controlling their schedules and prioritizing who and when they should speak. And so with civil society leaders, they're just working from the ground, trying to figure out, how do I get the resources for me to be able to go through the journey of what my objectives are as an NGO leader, as a leader in trans rights, as a leader in LGBTI rights, or what have you. So the gap is always, it's perpetual, because the governments themselves just don't have the time. And so for example, what plans take place, or what sort of ideas take place, is something like the Global Equality Caucus, where we say, let's get a collection of parliamentarians to be members, first and foremost, and let's reverse the order. So let's not have the civil society leaders reach out to us, let's have the parliamentarians reach out to the civil society leaders. And that way they can say, because parliamentarians, state representatives, whatever country you're from, they do want to make a difference, but they just don't know how, or they do know how, but they don't know where the resources are. And one of the shocking facts that I've learned over the years, or especially with the lawmakers for LGBTI equality, is that the parliamentarians don't know what resources are available, or they don't, until it's too late, realize, oh wow, there's an NGO group that's currently working on this issue. Oh wow, there's an NGO group that's currently working on this issue. You know, it's really it's a lack of communication, and so it's organizations like the Global Equality Caucus, Outright International, Dignity Network. Those are the people that are trying their best to find those gaps and bridge them through conversation. And in this case, for lawmakers, it's making a digital series and making panel discussions. And the beautiful thing and the end result is always, wow, I didn't realize that you existed. This is amazing. Let's have a conversation afterwards and see if you can help me with this funding application, because we're kind of running out of money and we have a lot of projects, a lot of cases we're working on. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. I've also learned that celebrity status is a huge tool, whether it's just Justin Trudeau retweeting something that we sent out, or if it's a quick sort of a tidbit of information, or maybe like a spokesperson that, you know, pushes an Instagram story about, you know, the work that's happening in LGBTI, that really matters. And I was really against it initially, because I didn't want to create a novelty out of this. I didn't want to say, oh, you know, I never wanted that celebrity to take advantage or leverage this for their own needs. But I learned over the time that it's actually really helpful, because there's people that just don't have the network, or they don't have the social media, or they don't pay attention until a celebrity comes out and says, like, you know what, you should consider supporting this, because this would be huge. This is a huge issue, and we need your help. We need your vote. We need your perspective on this. So those are some of the biggest things that I've learned, especially when bridging those gaps.
That first key learning is very interesting. It's just the basic, right, is communication. So I find that even when I'm reaching out to people, that's just the first line, is communication and getting to the right people in order to ensure that you're in the schedule. So I love that key learning. Laura, you currently work at the Maritimes Guatemala Breaking the Silence Network. Could you expand on the organization's mission and some of the learnings that have been a surprise to you during your career leading to that position and your current role?
So Breaking the Silence, or BTS, we're a solidarity network. So it's a bit of a different kind of organization, but it formed in the 1980s when we began providing accompaniment and support for different partners in Guatemala following the internal armed conflict. And those relationships have continue to the present day. So we continue to support partners in Guatemala who are fighting against Canadian extractive projects, or who are continuing with transitional justice after the internal armed conflict. So we provide support in Canada with advocacy on the Canadian side. And we also provide like support with urgent action, so helping mobilize Canadians here when there's support needed. But with our mission, we really are also looking at bridging the gap and helping our network members see the connections between the issues that people we have relationships with in Guatemala are facing there and also in Canada. And that is a big part of the work as well. And I think that has also been one of my surprises, is that there's a lot of work to be done in that area of bridging those gaps and of kind of widening the lens with our advocacy just in general, between those like north-south connections or those global connections that we're all facing with these collective issues, where if you just look at extractivism or different things, it may be Canadian companies who are doing extractivism in the global south or in different areas, but there are also Canadian companies who are having the same tactics and different things happening in Canada. And so the kind of organizing that we can do in one part of the world can also be impactful in another part of the world. And with a big learning or a big surprise, I guess, for me in my career journey has been, again, like the power of bringing people together and building those relationships in order to help people who are fighting the same fight or resisting the same things come out better in the end, or to receive different kinds of support, and to really build those relationships and the power that those can bring.
Thanks for sharing that, Laura. Juan, Laura had touched on briefly earlier on the importance of allyship, and I'd love for you to describe in your career some of the initiatives that you've led or been a part of in order to combat inequities as an ally and an advocate.
Yeah, for me, it really comes down to education, right? Or at least I didn't learn about residential schools in high school. I came to Canada to finish grade 10, and so I was, the picture that I had of Canada was a wonderful country. It's still a wonderful country, don't get me wrong, right? But like the more that you learn about the history, not only against indigenous peoples, but also against, Chinese, against the Sikh people, which Jewish peoples, right? There's the stories of anti-Semitism in Canada are well known. So yeah, it's like the most important thing is it's learning and educating yourself. I had to go to university to learn about residential schools, but I had to go to a course that I chose to go, right? So this wasn't taught to me. Like not a lot of people choose those courses. It was me that I selected that course to go. I believe these type of courses should be mandatory, right? And I know, I would hope, and I think that the school curriculums have changed to include the history of indigenous peoples and residential schools. So we really know, the true history, because what we need is I think it's a cultural shift to change our ideology and what we were taught, and then really learn the true history of Canada. And even though we were not, and this is something that Justice Sinclair said, which is the commissioner of the Truth and Reconciliation Report, He said that even though we were not part of this, the residential school system and the creation of it, we do have, all of us are responsible to, make sure that reconciliation happens. So we do have a part into addressing these inequities and making a better society for all. Because at the end of the day, a society that marginalizes other groups, the whole society, it's losing, right? We're not really seeing the benefit of everyone being able to be themselves and perform to the better of their capacities. So if we do have a just and an equitable society, we'll do much better as a group, as a society, and as a diverse community. But like you were saying, it starts with yourself. So you need to educate yourself, you need to get out. MRH was one of the greatest experiences that happened to me, and the amount of learning that you do there really contributes.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks for sharing that. Transitioning from allyship and creating initiatives, Goran, you've been part of many different initiatives, but what have been some of the challenges or barriers you faced when advocating for a marginalized group? I know that as the former communications advisor for Mission 89, which is a nonprofit advocacy and research organization based in Geneva that works towards ending child trafficking in sport, I'm sure that was a difficult process in itself. So how do you set up yourself mentally to dive into this world of human rights and advocacy?
Good question. So working at Mission 89 was a fascinating experience, because not a lot of people know that there is a lot of trafficking that happens behind the scenes in sports. And I mean, when I prepare myself mentally and something like that, I think I remind myself that this is something that I've wanted to do. I never really wanted to work in massive sporting events, or I've always had this idea that sport is a vehicle for development. And so this is a perfect example of something that is working towards the betterment of marginalized communities. And considering the fact that this happens all across Africa and Eastern Europe, I have to remind myself that this could have been anyone. This could have been me. This could be my nephews. And so when I prepare myself mentally for something like this, I empathize a lot, and I consider myself. I consider putting myself in those shoes and those perspectives to see, okay, well, how would this go about, and how would I be able to save myself? How to be able to save my family? Because, and if, for example, what happens in anti-trafficking in sport is you have a sham agent that goes down to Africa, watches a soccer game of under 16 kids and says, wow, that one kid is really talented. So approaches the kid and says, if you can give me 5,000 euros, I will send you over to a D-League startup soccer team in Switzerland, and you'll be set for life. And obviously, especially in any sort of third world, second world country, that's a dream come true, because obviously you want to consider the kid is probably thinking not only of himself, but also taking his parents out of poverty. So the young kid would go to his parents and say, I have an opportunity to play in Europe. Can we take out all the money from our savings account, give it to this agent, so we'd be able to go and I can start a new life for us. So not only does he take this money and give it to sham agents, but he's also sent to Europe and abandoned and resorted to do a number of things, from prostitution to drugs and alcohol dealing, the whole gambit. So that really puts things into perspective, because we're not safe from in North America. It does happen here as well, but not to the same extent as it does back in Europe and in Africa. So when I think about the mental state, I think about what, in my current role, what can I do, and what sort of ideas can I give to this organization to help them save these kids and prevent this from happening, and also prevent from this ever existing. So that, considering, bridging the gaps between these not-for-profits and these large federations like FIFA and the European leagues, Like, what can they do? I mean, we connected with the airline organizations and said, how can we train these flight attendants to be able to read the signs of a young child being driven from his home country all the way to Europe by himself? Like, are there signs that we can read to be able to tell, okay, he's being trafficked? How can we prevent this from happening? So this is a mental state of putting family and myself in these situations, and also considering that this has to be fixed. There's no way around it. It's like waking up in the morning and eating. This has to be solved. There has to be a way to get around it. So that's how I get through it.
Yeah, I bet that's very difficult. I couldn't even imagine. Laura, advocacy and human rights is, as we've mentioned, heavy and emotional work. What have been some of the challenges with your career when it comes to advocacy?
Yeah, I think Goran like spoke on the mental stress, and I think in any career, when you're really trying to have an impact, like whether it's in your small circle, like if you're a doctor and you're trying to have an impact on patients, or whether you're trying to advocate for a bigger cause, there's definitely going to be that like mental stress. And the best advice I ever received was like, you can't pour from an empty cup. Like, it's just not going to be possible. It's just not going to happen. And I think that comes in a lot of different ways. So with advocacy and with working with human rights, your work can at times be difficult because you'll be working with not a lot of resources. So you really have to be creative, and there might not be like really swift change in what you're working with. It's usually like a more gradual process, or it might be like small personal changes rather than systemic changes. So I think that those can be further challenges. And I think you just have to remind yourself of the bigger picture, and also focusing on yourself in ways like, because you have to remember you can't pour from an empty cup in order to generate that positive output. Yeah, and just to focus on what fills you up, whether that can be part of your work or it can be personal things. And yeah, I think those for me are some of the challenges.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Juan, it's been amazing to see you consolidate your social advocacy as well as your social justice interests. Do you have any recommendations of where students or professionals can start in order to take tangible steps in order to achieve advocacy or social justice at a global level?
Yeah, I mean, at the global level, that's probably hard. I mean, I just haven't worked in that capacity, but I think you should start small, right? Start with your community. I can tell you that, for example, in the provincial government in Ontario, we do have different employee groups, and I'm part of the Latin American Employee Network group. So we are an equity-seeking group, right? Trying to really address those systemic barriers that other, marginalized populations face in government. So I do encourage for people to, if they're students, to join those groups, because I'm sure there's, other student groups too. So, join those students groups. It's a great way to form those relationships, to create more allyship, and to yeah, I mean, join groups, take up courses, read on. And yeah, I mean, working in government has been, it's hard seeing that there has been a lot of pushback, but, having an anti-racism directorate, 10 years ago, that was something that you could never have imagined, right? And even being able to address systemic racism, it's something that was never on people's minds. at now, that's what everyone is talking about. In the private sector too, we see that, a lot of those big companies have really strategic diversity and inclusion plans and policies in place. And many of those too in the private sector, they do have employee network groups to, that are equity seeking. So those are the main ones that people should, focus on. Because I mean, it's gonna take some time to really achieve that at a global level. So start small, start within your community and your group.
Juan, we actually have a question from one of the audience members here today. And they asked, in an era driven by social media, how do you distinguish between performative and authentic allyship? Does it matter if allyship is performative?
I'm not too familiar with social media, but I think if the message is, for equality and for justice, whether the intention, right, of the messenger maybe just be for fame or, status or what have you. I mean, that's a very philosophical question, I think. But I think if the message is clear and if the message is, pro social justice, and that's the target, maybe, the target might be what counts. Because really, if that's going to influence other viewers or other followers, then I think that might be what counts. But hopefully that person in social media is also, being truth to herself or himself, and in posting any advocacy or allyship information.
Goran, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I come across this often enough in my work, but when I consider the differentiation between performative and the authentic posts, I usually look at the sources, and I look at the timing, and I look at the premise, and I look at the narrative, because more often than not, we have elections that come about. So people want to leverage some of the situations happening around the globe, some situations happening nationally and locally, municipally, and they want to take advantage of it to say, you know what, I'm supportive, right? We've heard this from a red-haired man in the United States who's leveraged a lot of opportunities to say, this is something that I believe in and I want to support it, and then, kind of just disappears into the night. So I think it's really important to obviously read what they're posting, but also find out what the source is, and also understand that if they are saying this as a performative measure and as leveraging as an opportunity to get more fandom, then talk to them, ask them questions, ask them like, so tell me more about this and this belief that you have, like, because I've been working on this for over 10 years and I would like to know your perspective on it. So don't just like sit around and look at this and start, second guessing and saying, oh, this is fake or this is performative. It's really important to understand that this is our opportunity to educate. If it is performative, then let's take the opportunity to educate them and make them understand that what you're saying, if this is not authentic, that it's not okay. Like you're not really helping us, because as we talked about this in our call previously, the difference between allyship and championship is an ally is there that, and something my mentor has said to me so many times, is an ally is there to support you in the room, but champion is there to support you when you're not in the room. So you want to make sure that you're a champion for all the minorities, all the BIPOC, everyone that's struggling and that's having issues, that you're there for them when they're not around.
Yeah, I love taking that inclusive approach to your advocacy and ensuring that you're not just listening to people's voices and perspectives, but you're showing up and you're being there for them. Goran, to sort of piggyback on that and go into, you've liaisoned with the government throughout your career, and you've led very successful high-level panel sessions with the European Parliament, bringing together stakeholders ranging from UK parliamentarians to Interpol officers. What are some steps that others can take in order to organize and mobilize initiatives or conversations like you have in order to combat inequities?
I think in the case of the European panel session, which was for the anti-trafficking organization, I think the steps that the executive director and what we took was we obviously did a lot of research. We didn't want the wrong people in the room. We wanted to make sure that the people that not only were well versed in the topic at hand, but were also proponents to a successful development of the issue. So when it came to creating this specific panel, we had to make sure that the people on the guest list were the ones that we needed to sort of mobilize the change. And so we thought about, okay, well, let's think about all the levels and all the connections we could possibly make. We think about government, we think about NGOs, we think about the law enforcement. That's why we invited Interpol. Interpol was a huge piece of the puzzle, because they're the ones that are kind of tracking these sham agents. They're the ones that are tracking these young children who are being trafficked across borders. So and also keep in mind that are the groups going to get along, right? Because I'll tell you right now that when we're working right now with the United Nations Development Program on a project with Georgia and mobilizing and enforcing change for LGBTI in the country, is not all the LGBTI NGOs get along. So we have to keep in mind that, and through the research, this is how we found out, is like they want to focus on one area while the other ones want to focus on another area. So how do we make sure that there's no rivalry? Because there's rivalry between the funds that we're going to probably be able to get from the embassies. How do we make sure that the perspectives align with the ultimate goal, which is to create a framework for equality for LGBTI in the country? So it's kind of herding kittens, to be honest. It's trying to figure out exactly what are the issues and how can we make sure that they're all aligned and we can get them all through the door with the focus at hand.
Yeah, that was really well said. Thanks for sharing that. I think there's definitely some tangible advice there in order to be able to create the initiatives that you want and take a lead for the problems that you see. Laura, thanks for joining us again. We do have a question from the audience for you. What's one thing you'd like to say to people who want to use their privilege to become a champion for others, but don't know where to start?
I think that a lot of people feel that way, especially right now. I also struggle with that issue. And I think that when you have that desire to begin working on issues that you might not necessarily feel impacted by, or you might feel like it's a group that you might not necessarily belong with, that it's important to start learning about those issues and learning with those groups. And that I know I keep harping on it, but you need to have relationships and build those relationships, because when you have that understanding and that level of knowledge, then you can start working together, and because you understand the issues, and then you can work together to find solutions. And it also will bring more people in on those problems. And as allies and as people with privilege, we have to bring to solidarity moments or to any sort of issue. We have a special place to hold, and it's also understanding that positionality and where to be. And I think also understanding that being okay with when you enter into those relationships and when you enter into those spaces, that you're not going to be perfect and you're not going to always do the right thing or learn in the right way. So, but you have to start somewhere. And so if you're wanting to take those actions and you're wanting to learn, to start and to start reaching out and but also holding in mind your space.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.
Mhm.
We had asked this question while you were briefly off, and I'd love to get your take on it as well. But one of the audience questions was, in an era driven by social media, how do you distinguish between performative and authentic allyship? And does it matter if allyship is performative? I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting question. And it's something that is very, I think everyone has their own take on it. I think that social media is a really powerful tool, because when something is trending, or if you see somebody post about something that you had never heard about before, I think that that is really powerful. So I think to call something in a way like performative allyship, I do think that there is a case to be made for it, but I do think that you could also look at it like amplifying voices or amplifying messages. And I do think that when you're amplifying the right messages or amplifying the right voices, that when you put the energy and the thought into that, it can be really useful. But I do see people's point with performative allyship, where it's just an empty action. But I do think that when you bring something to the forefront of people's feeds, that can be a useful purpose.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, moving towards wrapping it up, we have someone who's interested in knowing, how do you maintain hope and direction towards a better world? And I'll add on to that a little bit more. What are some of the trends or tangible work that you're seeing happen in your fields? We can start with Goran.
That's a loaded question. Well, what I've been seeing, especially in parts of South America, is a lot of the LGBTI organizations have been revolting by creating their own organizations and sort of leveraging the abilities and resources of the government, which I think a lot of us, even in North America, don't do enough of, unless it's like a last resort. And in that sense, I think sometimes we are a little bit spoiled in North America, because all I hear is that NGOs don't want to get government resources or funding because there's guidelines and restrictions and parameters that they just don't want to follow. But what I see in South America, for example, is I see a lot of LGBTI people coming together and creating their own NGOs and saying that enough is enough, and we have voices and that we can start using them. And especially as because, for example, like as volatile as the situation is in Brazil right now, they're seeing opportunity that, they're not being heard, that their voices are being marginalized and they're putting out to the side. And in some cases, violence and disruptions and human rights violations are happening left, right, and center in somewhere like there. So what I do like to see, and this is not just in South America, this is happening in other places of the world, including Asia, is you see these groups and they see, and it's a lot of influence from other countries that have been doing it for so many years, like the United States of America, with organizations like GLAD and Outright and Dignity and all those others, and Kaleidoscope Trust. And they see that and they say, well, we can do the same thing. It took them long enough, but they're like, you know what, now is the time, because if we don't do this now, then we're never going to be able to make any change or mobilize any of our people, because right now we're being jailed, or we're being killed, or we're being put to the side and forgotten, and we're not getting the support that we need to be able to survive. So that's sort of what I've been seeing, and I love to see that. And I think big organizations across Europe and North America have a huge responsibility to be able to support them. And we hope to support as much as we can.
Juan?
Yeah, that's great, Lauren, because it is a global partnership, right, at the end of the day. But I do see, I tend to be a positive thinker, right? And considering where society have been, or at least where Canada was and where we are now, I think we're a much more inclusive society than before, right? There's a lot of work to be done, for sure, and it's hard work and it's heavy work, but I think it starts by speaking out against it. Right now there's saying silence is violence, so just being being non-racist is no longer an option, right? You need to be anti-racist. You need to really be an advocate. And that's a trend that has really given more hope that we are on the right track. I can tell you, in government 5 years ago, we would not be able to say white supremacy in our trainings, right? Even just saying the word white would senior leaders would be like, no, we cannot say that. But right now, no, we need to call it by what it is, right? We need to address white supremacy in all its forms, and that includes other forms of ideologies that have been the norm for centuries. And because this is just a couple of 100 years old, what has happened in the world was, the enslavement of Africans, right? The mistreatment of LGBTQ community. It comes under that same umbrella of male dominant, Judeo or Christian dominant ideologies that have suppressed others. So speaking up, speaking against hate, and work on this type of careers it's what we need to.
Yeah, most definitely. And the fact that we can actually label things and use the proper language for what it is to be is very important. So it definitely has been nice to see society move towards that transition and see the inclusive practices that Canada continues to try to lead by example and is always receptive to more feedback, which is wonderful. Laura?
I think there's reason to be optimistic. I think that, like, in the international development world, people are making those connections between North and South, or that, like Juan was mentioning earlier, between Canada's colonial history and colonial history in other areas. And so I think that making the connections between these bigger issues that we are all working with and we're all responsible for is a positive development that, and as Juan saying, that now we're using words. And I think that that's one positive development, and actually recognizing those issues and coming together to figure out how together we can change these bigger systems that affects all of us and that we're all part of, is important. And it's a positive development that we are seeing as well, nationally or globally, in different organizations as well.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone. Those were incredible learnings and insights into not just your career experiences, but tangible steps that everyone listening can take in their everyday life. And hopefully when they're pursuing a path of political advocacy and working towards human rights and advocating for marginalized groups through social justice. So I really appreciate your time. That was absolutely wonderful. And our audience had some great questions as well coming in. And please, if anyone's listening or watching post live conversation, I'm sure these individuals would be happy if you reached out to them. If you have any other questions, I'm always available as well. I'll let everyone give a quick 30 seconds if they want to wrap up with anything, or where people can find them, whether that's through email or social media. And once again, panelists, thank you for your time. We can start with Laura and then just popcorn it over to wrap it up.
Yeah, I just thank you for organizing the panel, and thank everyone for taking the time to learn more about political advocacy and MRH. And yeah, my email would just be lrobinson@balsaryschool.ca.
Awesome. Thank you, Goran.
Yeah, I thank you for having me. I think I'll just leave you guys with the fact that it's always a good time to be an advocate, and question everything you read, question every media post, every news report, every Instagram post. Like it's a difficult time we live in, and we don't know what's fact and what's fiction. But as long as we read the sources and understand the narrative, then we can decipher exactly who needs the help and how we can support them. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me anytime.
Awesome. Thanks. And Juan?
Thanks. I did post my email in the chat in case anyone wants to reach out, and we'll be happy to talk. Really hope that you guys could go to the trip next year. I mean, these couple of years have been challenging for everyone. So just, keep taking care of ourselves. Be grateful for what we have. And if you could go next year, that will be, I'm pretty sure, a life-changing experience. So
Awesome.
enjoy the time there.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And please feel free to reach out to the MRH organization or group. You can also check out the website, which I believe is mrhcanada.com. I might be mistaken. Carla can correct me in the chat if it's different. But yeah, feel free to reach anytime. And hopefully as an alumnus, you stay engaged. We have a lot of different discussions coming up in the coming year. And if you ever know someone who might be interested in joining MRH or coming on one of the experiences, please let us know. And you can contact the group as well at marchofremembranceandhope.com. And for the website, I was corrected. It's marchofremembranceandhope.org. So you can go and visit that today and learn more about the organization and how to get involved. So once again, thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye all, take care.